work.
Welcome to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's live streaming interview series, where leading new thought teachers, speakers, and authors share the intimate stories behind the 10 best spiritual books that inspired them the most on their spiritual journey. From well-known classics to hidden gems you might never have heard of, the No BS Spiritual Book Club saves you time and money by sharing reliable recommendations from those who've walked the path before you. The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello and welcome. And joining me today to share the stories behind the 10 spiritual books that influenced her the most on her life journey is producer, teacher, integrative lifestyle practitioner, and the woman behind the success of some of your favorite spiritual teachers programs, Wendi Cohen. Wendy's not only had many years' experience in the fields of meditation, mindfulness, and wellness, she's also been a dynamic and instrumental force helping people from all over the world, both as a teacher and as an integrative lifestyle practitioner, and working up close and personal with some of the brightest minds in the wellness industry. Wendi spent several years at the Chopra Center for Wellbeing, working with Deepak Chopra on some cutting-edge research in meditation and Ayurveda, and managing and facilitating their signature program, Perfect Health. And she now plays a pivotal role as a director and member of the creative team at Lee Harris Energy, where she supports Lee's projects and courses and is a show producer for his weekly podcasts, Impact the World and It's Weird Being Human. Wendi Cohen, welcome.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so glad we've got you here at last, Wendi.
Mm-hmm.
So now tell us about reading. I mean, you've said that you are a voracious reader. You've been a voracious reader most of your life, and pretty much anything and everything, you'll get your hands on.
Yeah. It's interesting, Sandy. As a child, I was really shy. And in fact, that's more my tendency than being extroverted. And so I escaped in books. Like many people have said to me when they share a similar thing, that a book can befriend you and a book is a great place to get lost in and to learn. And I've always been somebody that has this insatiable curiosity. So even with a fiction, I go into, wow, what are the layers to this character? Or how did this writer come up with this vision? And then of course with spiritual books, I mean, there's just no greater thing to kind of, take yourself on a journey and to learn or be moved or be inspired or reminded. And so, I'm taking a break from those right now, and I'm reading summer beach reads, that are fun and light and, offer a different experience.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you have you always had an interest in spiritual things, or was there a particular moment in time or incident that turned on your light?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and I think that it's interesting because I think I've always been a seeker, even from my young age. But it was really when I was faced with a medical challenge that things got really real. You hear about those moments that
Yeah.
you have a choice to embark on like the deepest healing and growth edges that you weren't expecting. And for me, that was a diagnosis, and it kind of turned my world upside down, Sandy. And so I ended up wanting and needing more things to support me.
What was the first spiritual book that you ever read?
It's a great question. I would think that, spiritual is such an interesting term because I think, in all books you can find spiritual meanings, but I think really the first one that is more, a very spiritually guided book is Deepak Chopra's Seven Spiritual Laws for Success. I mean, for
Mm.
me, that was the book that really continues to stand out in my mind as one of the most influential, life-changing books that I still, commit to reading as I go with my practice, my meditation practice. So I've had many spiritual experiences and many spiritual lessons up to reading that book, but that for me was something changed in me reading that book.
Yeah, and that book is on your list, and we will talk a little bit more about it. And you, unlike most, you put your list in alphabetical order.
Well, of course.
You're a very organized person, aren't you?
Crazy.
So,
Crazy, Andy.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's okay. It's all right. You're allowed to be. And the first one on your list contains spiritual beliefs that spoke very deeply to you at a time when you were taking most of everything way too seriously, you say, and personally. So I think that might give people a clue as to what I'm talking about. It is, of course, the Four Agreements, A Practical Guide to Personal Freedom by Don Miguel Ruiz. And tell us how that book impacted you.
Yeah, and I know this book is on so many of the people, that you feature on their list, and I think that's definitely important to note here because it is just such a powerful book, and it's such the Toltec wisdom that's expressed in it is just really a way of life. And at the time, I was working at the Chopra Center, and Don Miguel and his son were guests. And I saw him up on stage, and I had, of course, heard of the Four Agreements, but I never really picked it up and I never really put it into practice. And for me, again, like you said, I was taking things very seriously and very personally. I'm a people pleaser, I'm a perfectionist recovering. And I really felt, Sandy, that, this was such an authentic way to approach some of my work personally in transforming some things that weren't really serving me. And the book really speaks to how we create suffering on our own. And I was certainly doing that by taking things personally. And I love that it really teaches us to embrace being authentic and to have personal freedom in our lives that I wasn't granting myself. So I think, always do your best, be impeccable with your word. Those are such beautiful things to be integrating on a daily basis. And that's what I started to do. And I still continue to do. It's the book I recommend to clients. It's a gift that I give to a lot of people. It's an amazing, wonderful book.
You said that you met Don Miguel and his son. Which son?
His youngest.
Right. Yeah, I've interviewed Don Miguel Senior and Don Miguel Junior, and they're just lovely people.
Wonderful.
And yeah, and the what is shared in this book and in all of their books is on display in their characters all the time. Yeah, yeah.
Talk
So
about authenticity.
authentic. Yeah.
There are a lot of people that take the stage and they're not necessarily, it doesn't always translate.
Yeah.
And that was my experience with him.
Yeah, yeah. Were you, I mean, did you read Deepak's book after you joined the Chopra Center? After you started working there or before?
Before
Before.
yeah, I was a guest there for many years. I found my way to the Chopra Center in a way that, of course, seemed like it didn't make sense, but of course, the divine orchestration of the universe.
Mm.
And it's interesting because when I went actually to the property where the Chopra Center used to be, and I took myself there. I was by myself, feeling sorry for myself, and I walked into the center and had a group meditation that was complimentary. And actually, the person leading it was one of your featured guests, David G.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because at the end of that guided meditation, they read the law of the day. And I thought, wow, this is so powerful. So I picked up the book right away and just dove into it, and then continued to visit the Chopra Center until, through a chain of amazing, wonderful events, then I became part of their team and served there for many, many years.
Interesting how life works, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, book number 2, you describe this as mindfulness meets neuroscience, and you say that it's a sweet go-to book if you're feeling stuck, stressed, or needing to reprogram your thoughts and reset. And it's called Just One Thing, Developing a Buddha Brain, One Simple Practice at a Time by Rick Hansen.
Mhm. Yeah. This is funny because a lot of people think that healing and spirituality and transformation um, is a really difficult thing and a deep thing, and I believe that. But I also believe in doing little things. And this was gifted to me by a client because my part of what I teach and try to mentor is, do one thing. It doesn't have to be big. It can be little chunks at looking at how to make a change in enjoying your life or being good to yourself or being engaged in the world. And this book is really that. And what I love about it is it has the science-based information that I think is just really cool when it comes to, the neuroscience and how people change and what happens in our brains. And I got uh, I got to experience some of that research when I was working with Deepak, and I think it helps to understand, have another depth of understanding around why spiritual things or mirror or mindfulness really does help and make a big difference. So what I love about this book is there's every section, every chapter has a how section. So again, because I think a lot of times we read things in books, but then how do we integrate it? And
Yeah.
so I love it. And in fact, I picked it up this morning in preparation for today. And what was cute is that it reminded me, so one of the pillars is engage the world. And in that section is be curious and be generous. And it's really interesting because those are some of my core values. And I looked at the chapter and I thought, yeah, this is so good. If I was just to open the whatever page, which is what I did this morning, and land on anything, it was so valuable to me. So this is a sweet little, like I said in my list, that it's just a sweet reminder. And sometimes that's all we need, right? We just
Yeah.
need to plant a seed or go back to something that we already know. And so I love this book for that reason.
Yeah, I find the 4 agreements are great reminders for me. I'm always going, "Oops," when I
Yeah,
remember.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No,
"Oops,
they're
you know this."
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
So book number 3 is Sacred Powers: The 5 Secrets to Awakening Transformation by David G.
Mhm. Yeah, so David G and I go way back, as I mentioned. He has been one of my greatest teachers and mentors, and I found this book at a really pivotal time for me. I had left my role at the Chopra Center, which was where I really identified, and it really spoke to this book really helped me to understand about new beginnings and recalibration. And it came at a time where I was in a sense reinventing myself because I was teaching more, and I was also doing one-on-one client work versus running programs and organizing events. And I love this book for so many reasons, mostly because I love David G and I love his ability to translate so much wisdom in a way that is relatable and isn't too complex. And what I found myself doing is taking little bits of it and introducing it into my teaching. If I led a meditation, I'd read a small portion about an awakened heart, and I would ask some of the sacred questions. But what's wonderful about the experience of this book, similar to the other ones that we've already talked about, is it's kind of a great go-to book, as reference. Am I connecting enough to my intentions? Am I not asking the questions I need to ask myself? So I love it. It has so much information, and I think this book is best read in chunks, to kind of
Mm,
take a sacred power and really dive into it, and then
mm.
go back and rework it, and then come back to it again, and then move on. But my favorite thing about this book was I discovered my winning formula. Did he talk about that when you had him on the show at all, the winning formula?
I don't think he did, no. We
Okay.
talked more about, the books that he'd enjoyed.
Yeah. Yeah. So the winning formula is introduced in this book, and it's really, I thought it was an unexpected gift. And really, our winning formula is the thing that we innately have that 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 leads us to different things. And when I know what our winning formula is, like for him, he says his winning formula is that he has a sense of humor, and he's able to use his humor to engage people. So it doesn't matter what he's teaching or talking about. And
Mm.
so I had to really look at, okay, what's my winning formula? And when I discovered it, it was really interesting because then it made sense why I do certain things, and then how to capitalize on those things and those gifts. And so it that was a really kind of unexpected thing as a takeaway from reading Sacred Powers.
Are you gonna tell us what your winning formula is?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So what I realize about myself is that, my winning formula is that I'm curious, I care, and I work hard. So what's interesting about certainly in the place I am now professionally and personally is that it doesn't really matter if I'm, working one-on-one with a client, or producing a podcast, or supporting a course, or, doing my own work in the world. Those 3 things are always core parts of everything that I do. And so now I kind of pay attention to that, as my formula, and I've been very lucky to find myself, doing the work that I love and learning from people who are, some of the brightest minds in the world,
Mm.
and creative and wonderful. So, I think it's important for people to figure out their winning formula.
So how do we figure it out?
Well, I think it's sitting with what is innate, and what happens to us when we just show up as ourselves. It's like, I was reviewing my books again this morning, and I thought they all have the thread of leading me to wanting to be more authentic. And
Mm.
so, and really, like, one of your, I think, part of your winning formula, Sandy, the little bit that I know of you, is that you're a connector, and
Mm.
you're somebody that likes to share information
Yeah,
and gems.
yeah.
And so I would say that's probably
Mm.
a good part of your winning formula.
Yeah, shameless sharer, I call myself.
Yes,
Yeah,
I remember.
I'm shameless. I can't stop doing it.
No, but isn't that beautiful? And that goes back
Mm.
to what I read this morning in
Yeah,
Just One Thing. It's about being generous, about,
yeah,
sharing what we can, and what
yeah,
also lights us up and brings us joy, that
yeah,
we need more
yeah.
of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it also helps being a Gemini because, Geminis have to communicate, so they can't just have something and not tell everybody.
Yes.
We
Well,
make bad liars.
yeah, yeah, it's wonderful though. Wonderful.
Yeah. I love that you love, you've had the opportunity to work with so many great people and learn from them and clearly, contribute to their work as well. I mean,
Mm.
it's a two-way street, you're giving something to them, they're giving something to you. But that's, it's living in your passion, isn't it? And working in your passion.
Yeah, I some days I wake up and I go, "How did I get this lucky?"
Yeah.
It hasn't been without hard work and commitment and
Yeah.
investment. But yeah, I have found myself in rooms with people that people would only dream of being with, and for me, it's always been, such a humble experience to be in the presence of visionaries and people that are, helping people heal and transform. And it's never ever lost on me, my good fortune. And I think because I'm a constant student and I love learning, and that's part of what makes me me. I somehow co-created it and
Yeah.
manifested it,
Yeah.
and I'm so deeply grateful. And they have each of these teachers have come at the most divine time. You can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't.
And so I'm incredibly fortunate that I have found what my passion is, and how, it's funny. A couple years ago, I started saying yes to the things that only provided fun for me. I call it follow the fun. And what I found in following the fun was I was aligning to my greatest joy, and that was being with people who inspired me, or working with clients who I felt a kinship with, or felt that common humanity, and it was just incredible. So
Mhm.
I follow the fun, and it brings me to some amazing places.
Yeah. And I want anyone watching this to understand what you're saying here. I mean, people tend to think, oh, it's okay for you to talk. You've had all of that, but I can't have it. Anyone can have it. Anyone can have it. It's available to all of us. We've just got to desire it, intend for it, and then work for it.
Right. And I also think too, joy is such an important part of life. And I know we're living in very challenging times, and a time like no other. I think the joy is so important in healing and in spirituality, and I think if we are following that more, then it changes who we are, and then the
Yeah.
choices that we make. And yes, and I'm somebody that takes things very seriously. I'm very cerebral. I'm a thinker. I'm a seeker, but I also have this side of me that wants to be in experiences that are fun. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm. Well, book 4 in your list is The Seven Spiritual Laws of Success. And, let's not forget the subtitle, A
yeah.
Practical Guide to the Fulfillment of Your Dreams. Take note, everybody. Say a little bit more. I mean, you talked about the each day of the week, looking at a different law. And, I've not read the book, funnily enough.
Oh,
I don't know why not, but clearly I should. But I was intrigued when you said that, a law for each day of the week, and it starts with the law of pure potentiality, which on Sunday,
yeah,
which of course, the beginning of a week, everything is possible.
yeah.
And it ends with the law of Dharma, which I think is very apt. At the end of the week, you're going to reap whatever you sowed.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Well, again, this is, I mentioned this earlier, that I think out of all the 80 plus books that Deepak is reading, I think this is the most powerful. And it is basic principles that are really connected to the laws of nature that help us to understand how we can put things into practice. And so, yes, every day is the law of the day. Today is the law of intention and desire. And so, what I do, and the way I think it's best experienced, is you read the law of the day. It's a very short chapter. And then at the end of each chapter, there are three things that are suggestions as a way to integrate them. And so, I'll use today as an example. So it says to, connect to your list of intentions, to write a list, look at the list before you meditate, before you go to bed. Be very connected to, hey, what is it that I really want in my life? And then you keep going back to it. And so I did this early on, Sandy, where I wrote my list. It's funny, I wrote it with a green pen, which is just bizarre because green, of course, is the heart chakra color. And I wrote that list and kept that list tucked inside the book. And every Thursday, I would meditate, I'd read the list, and I'd connect to it very specifically on Thursdays. And it's so funny because later on, when I was teaching at the Chopra Center, I would share that list and how many things that I actually was able to manifest because I was connected to my list of intentions and desires. And that's just one out of many examples. Again, I think that when you are consciously aware of something daily, like a daily ritual, there's something very potent about that because it's in your awareness, it's in your energy field. You can access it. And so this book has become just part of my daily practice. I don't necessarily read it anymore because it's been, gosh, a dozen plus years, maybe even more, to 15 years plus. And so I know the book backwards and forwards. I've taught on the seven spiritual laws. And, depending on where you are in your life, one of the laws Friday is the law of detachment. Such a good law, especially right now with uncertainty and letting go. And again, not rigidly holding on to things that no longer serve us. And, as you move through your life cycle, I'm an empty nester now. So, detachment, several years ago when my kids, went off to college and then are doing their own lives, it was such a valuable, helpful, law to practice. And they're all really quite special. And I love to teach this, and I've taught parents this to help teach their little ones about again, the law of karma, is about the choices we're making. How do I make choices that bring good, and how do I, hold myself responsible for the choices that I make? And the law of least effort, Sandy, is a great one. That's on
Mm.
Wednesday, and that's go with the flow. You
Yeah.
know, just don't force things. Look at nature. The sun doesn't try to rise or set, it just does. Grass
Mm.
doesn't try to grow, it just does. And so that one was one for me to work on for a long time because, I was brought up with the no pain, no gain, work harder, do more. And this is all about, well, just be and see what happens, see what shows up, when you aren't trying to force solutions. And so I could go on and on and on about this book. I'm going to send you this book as a gift because I think that you will love it.
I will love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really it's like a friend to me that I, you know, pay respect to every day. So
I love it when people tell me about books that become more than just a one read kind of book. I mean, we get so much from books, and there are so many books to get a lot from.
yeah,
But to find certain books like The Four Agreements,
mhm,
like The Seven Spiritual Laws, I mean, these are, such basic fundamental guidelines for life
yes,
that they can't help but be like Bibles for people.
right, right. I mean, and that's the thing. It's so funny. But that's the common thread in most of the books that I've
Yeah.
recommended in my list is that they're almost like reference books. And
Mm.
sometimes I don't even necessarily read them all the way through. I go back and and I I revisit sections, or I don't start from the beginning and I just go right to a chapter that really pains me, or it just kind of speaks to me. And spiritual books are that's really what's wonderful about them. My problem, though, is I give them all away. And so, because I want to share them. So
Yeah,
sometimes I have to remember that, oh, I gave away, this book because I knew someone would benefit from it. But yeah,
yeah,
I agree with you. They're wonderful that way.
yeah. So book number 5 is another one that I don't know. Strong at the Broken Places.
Oh,
Voices of Illness, A Chorus of Hope, Richard M. Cohen. When I read up on this book, I thought, I don't know how I've missed this one, because it sounds like a fabulous, I mean, it's a major bestseller as well.
yeah. So I found this book when I had some really significant medical challenges. starting in 2003 and then really very challenged in 2008, 2009. And I saw Richard Cohen, who's the author, on a talk show. And I had been following Richard a little bit because he suffers from MS. And although that's not what I have, I do have an autoimmune disease. And I was so compelled to read it because he features very brave and vulnerable people that have chronic illness. And it was at a time, Sandy, that I didn't feel understood. I was in a place that so many people in my life were having to figure out how to navigate me being in a different state of health. I was always somebody that was really, active and involved, and my life got turned upside down. And so this book brought to me a deeper understanding of how these people featured in the book. One woman in particular had Crohn's disease, and I was really struck by her story and her sharing and how, you know, how she was navigating that in her life. And it was very honest, and it wasn't sugar coated, and it was real. And that's really what I needed at the time. And really for anyone that's just not even, that doesn't even have, health issues, it's just a beautiful read because it's about people that are getting up every day and managing and navigating their lives, with courage and vulnerability, and we can all learn from that.
Yeah, it said in I think the explanation about it that this is a book born of the desire of many to share their stories in the hope that the sick and those that love them will see that they're not alone. It is, I mean, illness is a very, it divides you. It separates you from others and from life. And, I understand what Crohn's disease is like. I've got relatives who suffer from that. And, people with MS and other autoimmune diseases that are not going to go away. It really, does create a different life. Yeah. So it is important for them to know they're not alone.
Yeah, it is really important. And I think too, what I found very valuable is that we learn from other people's experiences. There's something in that storytelling that translates in such a heartfelt way that I think sometimes, I mean, that's where I tend to be the most affected if people are just sharing their experience. And so I think there's something in that too, that's very appealing to me in this book.
This is something that I was thinking about only this morning. One of the things that I love about these interviews, which are quite different from any interview I've ever done, any series of interviews I've ever done before, is it's great hearing about the books. And it's very useful to have this archive of recommendations. But the bit I love is hearing about the stories behind the book and hearing people telling about their story, not because they've written a book about it or they're pitching something about it, but just hearing people's stories. They're just fascinating, and they're so important because, as you say, we learn from every single one of them.
Right. Yeah. And really, the books are just part of the journey, right? That we take along with it.
Yeah. So the next book, number 6, Sensitive is the New Strong, The Power of Empaths in an Increasingly Harsh World, Anita Moorjani. Love Anita's work.
Yeah, I've had the good fortune to spend some with her. And she is somebody that I think is spot on with knowing that now is the time to be talking about this because again, I know I've always been highly sensitive and empathic, and I think at times I've thought, oh, well, that's not always a blessing. Sometimes that's a curse because I feel things deeply. I experience things at a depth that some people don't. And I think right now, this book is so important because our leadership needs to be more sensitive, and the aspects of what makes us highly sensitive is important because I think oftentimes we don't know what to do with it. You know, we either feel like we don't belong in the world because it's a small few of us, that are having these experiences. And so I love the timing of this book. I think Anita is a beautiful translator in anything that she talks about because it's heartfelt and it's
Yeah.
true. And what I really, my takeaway from this book was, how do I move more to self-love? How can I be more compassionate and loving with myself? I always recommend it to other people. Be kind and gentle and be loving to yourself, but oftentimes I don't necessarily point it back at myself. And I love that book for that reason, a remembrance of, yeah, it's important to have that. And especially during, the times we're having right now where
Yeah.
things feel intense and the energy is strong. And, there's there's so much that we're having to navigate, and being sensitive is good. It's strong, it's positive. It's
Yeah.
not it's
Yeah.
not a negative thing. And I think too often
Yeah.
we tend to think that, oh, I wish I wasn't so sensitive, or we get the messages from people, oh, you're overly sensitive. And so this book is wonderful.
Mm. So the next book was named by Forbes magazine as one of the 5 books that will actually change your outlook on life. And it is The Gifts of Imperfection. Let Go of Who You Think You're Supposed to Be and
Mhm,
Embrace Who You Are by Brené Brown.
mhm. Oh gosh, this book, I was trying to think, Sandy, when I read it, and I couldn't place the time, but I know when I read it, it was like life-changing for me. I've alluded to my perfectionism, and it will continue to be my work, my personal work. But what I love about this, it was about wholehearted living, about being authentic, being vulnerable, letting go of shame, embracing imperfections. And I think that's so important. I know for me, that is the way I want to live my life. I'm learning that perfectionism is not healthy. It's not something I want. And so this book just offers that reminder again to be more loving and um, to come from a place of worthiness, to embrace the things that we don't love about ourselves, but make us who we are. And again, that self-compassion. And I think she speaks so beautifully to vulnerability.
Mhm.
I also think as an author, she's real. I've seen her speak as well, and she's the real deal. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, and that's much needed today. I mean, you look at the young girls who all have an ideal
Right,
that's, on TikTok or Instagram of what perfectionism is, what
right,
perfection is, and they want to be the same, and 10 years ago, perfection was something else.
right,
And in 10 years' time, it will be something else again. So
right.
it's something that is unreal anyway.
It is, right.
And yet here we are all thinking that we have to be perfect in order to gain approval.
Right,
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
yeah,
so much of it is about that acceptance, or what we think other
yeah,
people want. And yeah, I think this book is a really important one.
Well, I will tell you that when I was reading about this book, I immediately went and bought it
Oh, good,
because I thought, oh, okay, I've got to read this one.
good. Yeah, yeah.
I love that about your list. From time to time, I come across books on people's lists that I think, oh, yeah, that's something I put on my list. But I think this is the first time I've acted on it immediately.
Oh, good, good.
So,
I love
yeah,
that.
so you did a good job.
Thank you.
The next one is, again, it's, what I love about these books is the humanity. The humanity in them. This one is called Untamed, and it's by the activist, speaker, and best-selling author and, quote, patron saint of female empowerment, Glennon Doyle. I'm a human being meant to be in perpetual becoming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Say more about this.
yeah. When I read, and in fact, I just got goosebumps again. When I read that, I thought, yes, this is about becoming. I'm in the phase of my life that I'm really wanting to let go of old stories or people pleasing or some of the things that are not really helping me become who I am meant to be. And I think Glennon does an incredible job and service to people who are not really living the lives that they really want to live. And she so bravely shares her journey in little vignettes throughout the book. But really, I think I mentioned this in my list. It was the prologue. It was the initial reading of a visit that she took her daughter to the zoo, and they encountered a cheetah, Tabitha, I think, and it was that she was a caged animal, not really living the life that this animal was supposed to be living, and what that represented for her, and how we sometimes make choices because we think that's what we're supposed to do. And again, going back to being authentic and being real and becoming the best version of yourself without hesitation or apologies. And in my 50s, that's really important to me. It's really important to me. So all of her sharing, and I also really appreciate that she comes to it in with a sense of humor. One of my greatest teachers, David Simon, who was the co-founder with Deepak. My very first meeting with him as a guest, he said, "You're taking everything way too seriously, and you need to come at this with again a lighter heart and more playfulness. And what do you do for fun?" And I didn't get it. I thought, oh gosh, no, if I'm meant to be learning something, it was that it was serious and it was deep and it was so not that. And so I think Glennon does a beautiful job in how she weaves in the lighthearted moments in a moment that is of deep healing. And so, and her activism and just doing hard things and being brave, I think it's such an important message right now for all of us. So I love the book. It was one of my favorite books last year that I read.
Yeah. Well, there's a piece that I highlighted that really spoke to me when I was reading about the book. And I think it's something that she obviously writes at some point in the book. And I'm just going to read it because I don't think any woman watching this, and man, because it applies to them just as much, will not feel a connection to that. There is a voice of longing inside each woman. We strive so mightily to be good partners, daughters, mothers, employees, and friends. We hope all this striving will make us feel alive. Instead, it leaves us feeling weary, stuck, overwhelmed, and underwhelmed. We look at our lives and wonder, wasn't it all supposed to be more beautiful than this? We quickly silence that question, telling ourselves to be grateful, hiding our discontent, even from ourselves. I mean, who wouldn't, relate to that? Who
Yeah.
wouldn't? Man or woman? I don't care.
Right.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Clearly one that,
yeah, very powerful. Very,
yeah,
very
yeah,
powerful. Yeah.
yeah. One that definitely needs to be on everybody's list.
Mhm.
So book number 9, Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer John. It's fast, it's simple, and it works, you said.
Yeah, and it's so funny because again, this is really I don't even think this is in the spiritual self-development section of a
No, it's
bookstore.
business.
Business.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because my friend Gordon recommended me to add this to this book my list because it's unconventional. But what I find is that in my one-on-one work that I do, my clients seem to, and I've had been in this situation too, I'm sure you have too, Sandy, with managing change. And this book is this sweet little story of him and Ha and the mice, and it's so funny that again, it's all about looking at, are we making it more difficult than it needs to be, which oftentimes we are, and also just that change is a big spiritual subject. Letting
Mm.
go or seeing things in a new way or really shifting perspective, that those are such big spiritual concepts in this little book that, again, is not conventional in terms of being a spiritual book. And
Mm.
so that's why I added it to the list. And yeah, I think it's helpful in looking at it in a way too that isn't too heavy. It's lighthearted and it's to the point. You get the idea of what the author is trying to translate, and yeah. So that was my little unexpected um, yeah, addition to this list.
Well, it was written some time ago, but it is very, very relevant because everyone is experiencing change right now
Yeah,
and doesn't know when that change is going to end or
right,
what's on the other side of it. So yeah,
right.
that's another good one. Well timed.
Yeah, yeah.
So number 10, one of my favorites is Who Would You Be Without Your Story?
Oh,
Dialogues with
mhm.
Byron Katie.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so again, I had the good fortune to experience Byron Katie and see her do the work. And again, it's so interesting that at this time when I read this book, I think it was around, I don't know, 2010-ish. I think that I was really into my story and the narrative that unfortunately was that, you're not well and this is your story, this is your path. And reading about the different people in this book and her taking them through the work, I thought, God, they're so stuck in their stories, and I was so judgy and like, God, how, and because some of it is absolutely like in some ways ridiculous when you hear people really, when she's asking, is it true? Is it absolutely true? And they're like, no, it's true. Like, and there's no way about it. So it really helped me look at, wait, Wendy, you're in your story, girl, you're in your story and you need to stop it. And so I love her work. I think that it's important to get to the truth. And I think once I realized I am not my story, although certainly I have had all of these experiences to bring me where I am now, but I am not my story. It completely changed things for me and the
Yeah.
trajectory of what happened next for me when I had that moment of, I am not my story.
Yeah,
So
those perceptual shift moments are so powerful, and her work is filled with them. I've watched her several times in person
mhm,
and, on video and listened to her, bought her CDs,
mhm,
and I am just blown away at the downright common sense of it all, but we just don't think about it. I have a story that I share with everybody that really impacted me, and with with Katie. She was with a group of people that she was teaching, I think, and somebody stood up and said that there was something that they couldn't get out of their head. And it was a true story. And I remember when it was on the news of
mhm,
somebody in LA who had thrown a dog out of a car into the traffic. And all she could say is how terrible it was, and and she couldn't get it out of her head because this person threw the dog in the traffic. And and it was really a big thing for this woman. And, I mean, Kate is very down to earth and very direct. And she just said, it's not for us to say what he should and shouldn't have done. It's not for us to judge. However, she said, how many times did he throw the dog in the traffic? And the girl said, once. And she said, how many times have you thrown the dog in the traffic?
Mhm.
And that for me was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
It really makes you realize
Yeah.
what your thinking is doing.
Yeah.
And that changed it for that girl completely, right there and then. That was gone.
Yeah, and that's what's so powerful about her work is that
Mm.
it cuts right in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, what resonated with me with this book, because she Loving What Is another fabulous
Yes.
book, but I chose this one because it was the storytelling. It was
Yeah.
the actual looking at a human experience happening. Because really, what she did in this book was take the work that she had done around the world and then put together 15, stories around that,
Yeah.
and sharing, and very powerful. And
Yeah.
her in a room is just. Phew. I was standing. It was at the Chopra Center, and I was running the microphones in the audience, and a girl volunteered to do the work with her, and so I was next to her, just kind of holding space for her and supporting her. And that exchange was so incredibly, that it was tangible. I can't even describe it really, but the energetic exchange there, and then the 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 actual transformation that was happening right there, right then, was just, it
Yeah.
blew my mind.
Yeah. 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 I've watched people walk off that stage looking like a different person, as if somebody's lifted the world off their shoulders. It is immediate and it's very, very visible. Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah. It's one of those things where, people can't argue with it. It gets to a point where and they go blank and then they shift.
right, and I think even just on a daily basis, sometimes when I get caught up in a story, or I'm,
Yeah.
thinking a narrative, I'll stop and I'll just say, "Is it true? Like, is this
Yeah.
absolutely true?" And then it stops me from going down
Yeah.
that terrible rabbit hole that, we
Yeah.
can go down. But yeah, I love that book, for so many reasons, and I went to find it, and of course I gave that book away too. So
So that's your 10 books. And, there are, from my perspective, there are delightful 10 because every single one of them, I could relate to every single one. I'm grateful for all of the contributions, but occasionally I come across a list and it's a joy to talk about it because, I can find a passion for every single one of them. And that's true of your list. So thank you for that.
so
I want to talk a little bit about your your diagnosis and how you found meditation and mindfulness on your path to healing. How much, I mean, just tell us a little bit about that, about what meditation and mindfulness actually did for you.
yeah. Oh gosh, Sandy. So in 2003, I was diagnosed with this really rare autoimmune disease, bounced around from doctor to doctor. And like I said earlier, I was a marathon runner and a martial artist, and I was even the PTA president, which is something I would never do again. Um, but I went from having that life to having pain in my body, and uh, just a complete upheaval of the life that I knew. And I didn't navigate it well. I was paralyzed by fear. I was making choices to just kind of make everyone around me happy, and I just was somebody that was always really connected to myself, and I felt a complete disconnect. And so, like I said earlier, I had taken myself to La Costa, which is the property that the Chopra Center used to be on. and I wandered in and had that group meditation. And it was something that I just was not really expecting. Um, and what happened is I went back a couple weeks later and I received a personal mantra and I just started a daily practice. And what I found is that um, I was allowing myself to be still and quiet enough to have more sense around what I was experiencing. And so because of that, then I was able to make different choices. And so I fell in love with meditation in 2005 and have been a meditator ever since. And what I found, and when I teach meditation, it's with the idea that we give ourselves just enough space to just be. Like Deepak always says, we're human beings that are always doing, doing, doing. And so for me, meditation has been the most amazing gift I've ever given myself. It allows me to connect and to remember and to be with my thoughts. Because of course, a lot of people think you sit down to meditate and the thoughts go away, and they don't. Thoughts are part of the experience. It's more about redirecting back to being still and being with it all. And so, yeah, it for me, it has been life changing with how I manage, not only health things, but also how I manage just my day to day. Am I being more reflective and more compassionate and grounded and loving, or am I being reactive? And so it helps in so many different areas, and I could go on and on about that.
So it's helped you with regard to your condition as well.
Yeah. So there's been a journey with that, of course, like most people. But for me, my practice allowed me to find myself in situations and in places at the right time where I allowed myself to receive things. And as a result, it guided me to making different choices, because that's what happens when you are more connected to yourself, not the
Mm.
ego self, but the self beyond the mind, the intellect, and the ego. And you tap into, wait a second, who am I here? What do I really want? Um, how can I serve? And for me, it came at a time that, although I learned to meditate in 2005, and really, things for me were the most challenging 3 to 4 years after that. What it did help me do was to build a different relationship with pain, to not operate from a place of fear, but more in a place of being creative, or more reflective. And um, because I was committed to that practice, I wanted to become a teacher. I just wanted to learn more, Sandy. I had no intention of teaching meditation or doing anything that I did at the Chopra Center. I really just loved the teachings, and in anything I do, I always want to learn more. And so it was really, once I started teaching also, I really had another layer of healing around it, because I realized just how much it had helped me, and how it continues to help me in all that I do. Um,
So you're teaching meditation, and you have one-on-one sessions with people. I mean, is that all around meditation, or are you doing other things?
no, so when I left the Chopra Center back in 2017, I was doing a lot of one-on-one coaching or integrative work. I have a background also in Ayurveda, and I've done a million different trainings because I'm that constant student. And so when I work with my clients, and many of them I've worked with them for years, it's a very integrative, intuitive process. And I weave in meditation and mindfulness and NLP and Ayurveda, and I just take all the tools in the toolbox, and I look at ways that I can help people feel aligned. And I've been doing it now since 2017, and I'm doing it less and less because my creative work is shifting. But I love that. I love to explore things with people and be curious and help people find meaning and also I'm a very lighthearted practitioner in that I want the experience to not feel like it's a burden and not feel like it's so intense that people don't want to do the work. I've learned from mentors like David G. and Lee Harris and different people in my life that you can come to this in a way that doesn't have to feel so heavy and so deep. And so that's kind of what I do. Yeah.
Mhm. And you're currently working with Lee Harris
Yeah.
and producing his podcasts, which must be great fun.
So much fun. We had someone in studio yesterday, a beautiful teacher, Debbie Brown, who I've known over the years. I met her through the Chopra Center, and it was a Wednesday afternoon, and I thought, wow, I'm I'm in the midst of a beautiful conversation. This conversation is going to go out into the world, and it's going to ripple, and it's going to help people, and I get to be part of it. And it's amazing.
Yeah.
I love my creative work, and I find that again, it's been really fun. This I did not see producing a podcast in my work, a couple years ago. It wasn't something that was even in my radar, but the idea that I could organize something and support something that I care about and the ripple effect of that. So it's been a lot of fun, and we're approaching 100 shows almost. And
Wow, that many.
yeah, and you were a great
Phew.
guest on the show, and yeah, it's wonderful that some people that are more well known to the audience and other people that are doing amazing things to impact and
Yeah.
they're change makers. It's super cool. It's fun.
Yeah. It's a great podcast series, and Lee is a natural,
Yeah,
an absolute natural.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. So I don't need to ask you what gets you out of bed in the morning.
It's no, you don't, and it's funny because I get up and I'm excited to do what I'm doing, and
Mm,
I've been so grateful to have it, especially during COVID.
yeah.
For me, I feel incredibly lucky that I can pour my energy and my love and what I have in me into that, because gosh, the world really needs it right now. And the fact that I can get up and feel excited about what I'm doing is such a blessing. I'm so
Mm.
lucky. So lucky.
Well, you earned it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Wendy, that's brings us to the end, I think, unless there's something that you want to share with our audience.
No, I really want to thank you, Sandy, and I want to thank you for thinking of me. I also appreciated that you hung in there with me. I think a lot of people get intimidated by this process, and I realized I overthought it. I really was way too hard on myself in the process. So I want to thank you for the learning that came from that. But thank
Was
you.
it easier in the end than you thought?
I think well, yeah. I mean, and this has been so lovely. Again, like I think it's Thursday morning here in California, and I'm thinking, what a cool way to spend my morning. And I appreciate this conversation and the opportunity to share a little bit. And yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I mean, most people feel that it's a little bit daunting, but
Mm,
afterwards they've all said that was actually a really interesting experience.
yeah,
To go back over your life and look at the books that influenced you, it's a bit like a life review.
yeah,
And
it
yeah.
is. It is. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah. So thank you so
mm.
much. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Wendi. Thank you so much. It's good to talk with you.
Yeah, you too. You too.
If people want to know more about you, do you have a website? I couldn't find one.
I don't. And it's so funny, Sandy, because I own wendycohen.com. It's been on my to-do list for many years, and I realized I'm just more private in my work. So I guess the best way for them to reach me would be, through LinkedIn or through Facebook or somewhere there. I'd be happy to connect. And it's so funny because I'm still really feeling like I don't really want to have a website.
Well,
And
then don't.
I'm not going to.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Good for you.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Wendi Cohen, thank you for adding your 10 best spiritual books to the No BS Spiritual Book Club's library of recommendations.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandy. Lots of love.
You too. And thank you for joining us. You can see previous videos in this series on our YouTube channel, as well as the video page at nobsspiritualbookclub.com, where you can also sign up to our newsletter and be the first to know about these weekly interviews. That's it for this week. I hope you'll join me again at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me.